It's a 3-minute statement. Mr Goodman, may I ask you to give your statement?
Thank you, Chair. I wonder how many of you can remember being in primary school in Bath and being taken to the Museum of Costume. I doubt there are many. I can tell you that even at the tender age of 10, much that the visit was that this was etched on me for my entire life. It was when my love for the city, its culture and Georgian buildings began. The assembly rooms were always the iconic building, which even had more impact on me than either the Guildhall or Roman baths. But we never knew or indeed contemplated that the building wasn't owned by Bath Council. How wrong were we? It was some 9 years later that as a trainee building surveyor with Bath City Council that I realised that it was actually owned by the National Trust and we had a lease. Well, why is that significant? Simply because it had been known for years that the lease for the assembly rooms was coming to an end, and which would mean the museum would have to find a new home. A challenge, of course, but one that would be a new adventure for the world-renowned collection. Obviously, I'm not a party to where they look for the premises, but the big question that has to be asked is, why was the lease allowed to come to an end without a permanent site being found? The clothes are now in storage at considerable expense. I'm a great fan of Manchester United, despite the display yesterday, and this is like closing Old Trafford and putting the players into cold storage until a new stadium is built. This would never happen. You do not close a world-renowned museum without nowhere to go. So you may ask, what could have been done? And perhaps, due to my understanding of the profession, I may have a better understanding than most. The biggest issue has to be, why did the council give away Bathampton Meadows to the National Trust when they could have used that as a bargaining tool to keep the museum open? If the National Trust wasn't influenced by that bargaining tool, the council could easily have continued, if they wanted to continue on the giveaway, to organisation like Avon Wildlife Trust. The consequence of this monumental failure to negotiate a new lease resulted in a knee-jerk reaction to purchase the old post office at £7 million. This administration was so arrogant that they thought they could put in a £20 million plus bid for the Levelling Up Fund. They quite rightly got turned down. Why should a rich council like Bath have money for this type of event? Yes, if it was Foxhill, Twerton, Snow Hill, Peasdown, St John and other areas of North East Somerset, yes, I would support that. But it wasn't. Well, where are we now? Apparently the Museum of Costume will not reopen until 2028. But I will predict that if this administration stays in office, then Baines will reach net zero long before the museum reopens. The budget and business plan does not, as far as I can see, explain where the money...
statement to a close, Mr.
Where the money is coming from for the Bath collection. What I would do is I would urge the scrutiny panel and ignore politics, but to delve into what has happened to this situation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Does any member of the panel have a factual question for Mr. Goodman? Thank you for your statement. So, minutes from the last meeting. I just wanted to point out from those minutes, Councillor Bromley did make 2 comments regarding the Park and Ride and the wood burning stoves. And have you ever replied from Councillor Rigby? No. Okay, and Michaela is going to chase that for you. So do we have a proposal from the floor that they are right? Councillor Hurst, a seconder. Councillor Malloy, thank you. So I'd like to welcome Robert Campbell to introduce Heritage Services Business Plan. Thank you.
Hello. I haven't got a presentation today. The business plan's been circulated along with our strategy. I'll just pick out some of the salient points. So it's the annual revision of our rolling 5-year business plan. In 23-24, we're looking to deliver an £8.2 million surplus back to the council from our activities, and that represents a return to pre-COVID income levels, not profit. Surplus aside, the new business plan reflects the new strategy that we've been working on over the last year, which I think puts the service in a really, really good position in the post-COVID world. So we're responding to the changing circumstances we find ourselves in. Good progress is being made against the objective to get to net zero. We've started that journey now, which is positive. And also we've set out in the business plan some of the activities we'll be undertaking in relation to the Fashion Museum project. I'd welcome any questions.
So I've got Councillor Johnson.
One of the hardest hit sites in terms of visitor performance is the Victoria Art Gallery, and the report states that the gallery's audience is typically a slightly older audience than the Roman Baths, and this section of society has been more cautious about returning to situations where there's increased level of mixing. This appears to have a large impact on the projected amount of visitors to the gallery, which had previously been estimated to reach 132,000 visitors in the 22-27 business plan, which is still down from the 188,000 achieved in 1920. Now we're only estimating a return level of 71,000, which is a stark decline in visitor numbers compared to what was previously achieved and what we've anticipated in previous business plans. What I find slightly confusing is where the report picks out two clear action areas and priorities. So the first is in section 3.3.1, where it states that the service will also create an audience development plan for the Roman Baths and Clore Learning Centre that provides strategic direction to the service's efforts in engaging with different audiences, including those who we have not traditionally welcomed to our sites. And then in section 3.3.2, which talks about the discovery cards for residents and particularly focusing on increasing take-up in areas of the population who we previously haven't held discovery cards. So both points relate to an exclusion of all audiences, both locally and those outside Baines, but gives no further information or substance to help us understand who these audiences actually are, and brings me back to my other point regarding the Victoria Art Gallery, which is why aren't we focusing these actions on the heritage service that is clearly being hit hardest during our sort of post-COVID recovery? Why are we not looking at an audience development plan for the Victoria Art Gallery, where the report has clearly indicated its typical audience has been far more cautious about returning? It just feels like we are not really concerned about the slow rundown of one of the most sort of important cultural services the council provides in favour of chasing profit elsewhere. And, being profitable is good, but not at the expense of our heritage services.
Well, as you pointed out, the art gallery's seen a decline in visitation post-COVID due to a shift in visitor behaviour. So, as you pointed out, it did tend to appeal to an older audience, and we haven't seen those audiences return in as great a number, and we're not alone in that in the sector. What I would say is that Service and the Council are 100% committed to the Victoria Art Gallery, and next year there will be a historic investment in that site. So the Council's investing at least £250,000 in the rectification works to the roof, which are long overdue, and that work's getting done. And we've also been successful in fundraising for around £75,000 to invest in a new learning and community development space at the rear of the gallery. So we are investing in there. We are responding to the shift in visitor behaviour by trying to focus our efforts on some additional investment that will drive visitation across lots of different demographics, primarily families, and that's where we see the biggest growth audience at the gallery. So that's where we are with that one.
Councillor O'Brien. Sorry, I note that you comment that the commercial success of the exhibitions have been driven by Mary Fedden and the Preeta Brown exhibitions, which were both very local and, as a bit of a Philistine in terms of art, to me were very relatable and attracted a lot of interest because people could relate to them. And again, perhaps, and this is personal, my personal view, looking at some of the other exhibitions that were prevalent, quite abstract, quite for a niche market, and I would recommend that you look very closely at the type of art that's been brought in. It's predominantly art as in painting rather than sculptures, rather than other forms of art. And I believe that possibly you could start to appeal to a younger set, a less niche set, if the exhibitions were less niche in their objective. So I think that we could help ourselves quite a lot by revisiting our approach to exhibitions. And I'll give you one very good example, which sadly, because of COVID, lost us a lot of money. I was there at the Lautrec exhibition. It was fabulous. It was interesting, it was alive, you had every type of an age of person coming to see it. It was absolutely wonderful, and it's just sad that it was actually only able to open for just over a week before it had to close for COVID and lost us a lot of money. So I think there is a general comment, and I share Grant's reservations. You know, this is a city centre attraction, and I don't think we are putting enough zoom into improving it. And on that note, you mentioned that £75,000 has been raised for the additional learning estates, and you also say £250,000 is going to repair the roof. I believe I'm correct in saying that prior to the Lautrec exhibition coming, there was a condition, and the council invested £250,000 putting in air conditioning. So actually, that's £500,000 of our taxpayers' money going into something which is not really appealing broadly enough to the wider public. So I think there is a lot of really, perhaps, new thinking about the type of exhibitions that are put on there, and it shouldn't just be this new space. It shouldn't be just for Saturday morning playing with clay type things. In my view, it should appeal to a much, much broader area. So that is the first question, an observation, if I may say, in terms of, is there going to be a new approach to what we display at our gallery? And I'd like to also come back to the Fashion Museum. And indeed, at the Heritage Day last Saturday,
would you like me to respond on the art gallery first?
Yes, right.
The reason we don't have audience development planning noted in here is because we have just appointed a new senior curator at the gallery. She'll be moving into that space over the next year, but there's some personal situation we have to deal with over the next few months. But I agree with you. It is a historic moment for the gallery. The previous incumbent was in the role for 26 years. So changing that senior creative force in the space is a really good opportunity to think about audiences, think about who we appeal to, and make sure that we are making the collection and the space as appealing to as broad an audience as possible, with a real focus on local people and ratepayers, residents especially. And that is a fundamental commitment from the service to the Victoria Art Gallery. So I don't necessarily agree with the observations on the niche or not niche nature of the art on display. Like, it's a subjective thing. we'll see how we go in terms of visitor numbers. But a different approach and a more considered approach to appealing to lots of different audiences, yes, that's exactly what we're going to be doing.
Okay, thank you. May I ask my second question? Yes, it comes back to the Fashion Museum, and I actually asked the National Trust representative on Saturday, what were they going to do, why were they going to do it, etc., and why did they need the basement space? And she said that, this was going to be a development of Bath in that period of time. I also must say I share the reservations expressed by our member or our resident here today. I said, well, why couldn't we hang on to it? And she said, you did know about it. There was a period of quite a lot of time. What concerns me is that the administration have bought the old post office, taking out a substantial loan to do that, and banked on getting this 20 million lottery fund in order to develop it, which hasn't been forthcoming. And I know that you're going to have initiatives to raise money, so say to make it the fashion capital of the West. But in the meantime, there is going to be a loss of income because our residents and visitors won't be able to see the range. It's going to cost a lot of money to store it at Dents. And I don't see that there is a real certainty that this reopening date and therefore the costs associated with reopening can be achieved. Because it seems to me you've got a very decrepit old building which will need a total revamp, a very expensive total revamp, and I don't know where the money's coming from. So in the meantime, are you going to progress with Locksmith to house the rest of the range there, or are you just waiting to put the museum in first and then have the Locksbrook Research Centre as an addendum?
Just to be clear, the funding stream that we were unsuccessful with was levelling up funding. It wasn't from the Heritage Lottery Fund, National Heritage Lottery Fund. We're still open to go to them. And I'd note that they've just released their new 10-year strategy. And if you look at that strategy online, you'll see that the Roman baths is the cover image for that. And that is because we've just delivered an incredibly successful project that was predominantly funded by the Heritage Lottery Fund, the Archway project. So this service has a track record both in raising capital funding and delivering major capital projects from philanthropic funding. Now, you're right, we don't have the full funding picture confirmed in the business plan because we're still working that through. But what you do have is one of the most successful heritage museum services in the country, in the world. The amount of profit we make is almost unprecedented, and the quality and the approach we take to managing our assets is also unprecedented. This service has a track record of delivery and delivering for international audiences and delivering world-class attractions. And that is the professional expertise that we will bring to bear on the Fashion Museum project. We've also been successful recently in attracting high-caliber new members to the service, most notably the project lead, who's joining us from the Victoria and Albert Museum in Dundee to lead this project for us. So I have absolutely no concerns whatsoever that we cannot deliver this project. It's highly deliverable, and it's also highly deliverable in the timescale that we've set out. We are funded, at least for the next 18 months, to develop the master planning, so that's to procure the design team and progress that both for the Locksbrook site and the old post office site. And during that period, we'll invest in the fundraising strategy that will help us deliver that project. So I'm not saying it's not difficult, but I'm confident that the timetable we've set out, the aims and objectives we put in the business plan are deliverable.
Councillor Hurst.
Thanks, and thanks for a really helpful paper. I was wanting to focus in a little bit on the strategy, and kind of felt that the strategy really focuses on the three key assets maybe in the centre of Bath, so the Roman Baths, the Fashion Museum and the Art Gallery. And I kind of trying to zoom out slightly and reflecting on the fact that we've got 58 scheduled monuments in Bath and North East Somerset. We've got things like the Wansdyke, which is a designated on the monuments at risk register. We've got things like the second largest stone circle in Britain, and so I'm just my anxiety is that the strategy is too focused on kind of almost sweating the assets that we've already identified, and not maybe thinking kind of Bath and North East Somerset wide about kind of developing and kind of focusing on some of those broader assets that we've got across the whole of the authority, and that we could develop them and make Baines a kind of even more exciting and even more historically interesting place to come to visit if we develop some more services around some of those additional things. But on the other hand, I totally get that you need to focus on what works and kind of and make what works deliver. But I kind of feel like that there's so much more we've got to offer in Bath and North East Somerset that we could maybe focus on as well.
Completely agree with your observation about the variety of assets across the authority, and there's some really brilliant stuff out there. I'd just note that this is the Heritage Services business plan, and at the moment we operate the council's visitor-facing heritage assets, so we're not funded nor have the resources to deliver wider than that at the moment. And it is a big task delivering the business as usual work at the Roman Baths and the Victoria Art Gallery, and we're adding a big capital project on top of that. So without additional staffing resource and additional sort of direction to expand our strategy and our remit, we are where we are at the moment. What we are looking at is the wider cultural strategy for Baines, and we're looking at the sustainable tourism strategy for Baines. And when I say we're looking at, we're trying to get into a space where we can make some resources available to start to develop these things, link them back to the economic strategy, things like that. So it's not a no, we'll never do that. But at the moment, we're delivering the aims and objectives in the plan. So
follow up on that. In particular, I want to focus in on the Wansdyke, and kind of I've just got a great anxiety that we've got this important monument in our authority, some of which is definitely on Baines land, some of it is on other land, and at the moment I think that the monument is being gradually eroded and degraded because we've not had the opportunity to really focus on how we're managing that monument and working with Historic England to kind of really ensure that we're, number one, protecting it because it's on that heritage at risk list, and number two, kind of then seeing it as an opportunity for people to learn. We've got lots of schools who are boundaried right up against the Wansdyke, and I'm not really even sure that we're sweating that historic learning opportunity around that.
That as may be. It's not in my portfolio at the moment, which sounds like I'm passing the buck, but if it is a Baines asset or it's on Baines lands, then it will be the responsibility of the corporate property team, I would imagine. I'd be referring it back to them.
All right. Well, I definitely think we have a risk of being in silos, and this is part of our heritage. It's a really important piece of our heritage, and somehow it needs to be on your radar as well. So I'll maybe take it offline via Kevin as well, but I think we need to kind of make sure we're not thinking too in our little silos.
Completely agree with that. It's just all I'm saying. It's just not in the business plan at the moment. Always happy to consider different things. It is just deciding where we put our resources at the right time.
Apologies, Chair, my last meeting overran. But yeah, just to add to the Councillor's point there, that there are a number of assets that are in our property portfolios that probably they do come under immense historical value to the area, and they're not necessarily under the Director of Heritage's remit. So that is an issue we could probably look at and how there's an overlap there. Yeah, it's a good point.
So, welcome, Councillor Guy, to this meeting this afternoon. It's good to see the council leader here. So again, I've got Councillor Bromley that was just asked a question.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of questions here. So I was just looking at, well, just actually staying with the Fashion Museum. So what advantages do you see in its relocation, maybe more towards the centre of town and its reopening in a few years? And the second question is really looking at the World Heritage Management moving to the planning service. What do you sort of foresee any changes in the way things operate within a different sphere from that point of view?
The new location, the old post office, is fundamentally transformational for the Fashion Museum. We all really liked it in its previous location. The Assembly Room is an amazing building, but the museum itself was of its time and was very, very constrained in the basement location. Having a new site to look at with multiple floors, multiple areas will mean we can completely transform the visitor experience. Much more space for displaying more artefacts and introducing more modern interpretive techniques. It also gives us, both by the location and the flexibility the building will give us, a lot more opportunity for commercial optimization. So we haven't got plans yet because we haven't done that piece of work, but food and beverage offer, retail offer, corporate hire. The central location will mean it is much more accessible to audiences. Just, you don't have to walk all the way up to the hill. It's much closer to the heritage core of the city. It's much closer to the train station. It's proximate to the Holborn Museum. It's much more on the visitor route. It would be much more accessible as well to those visitors looking for education experiences, and we're hoping to partner with Bath College to build on the work they're already doing in this space. And what I'd also say is that its place within the gateway to Milsom Quarter also offers it the opportunity to sort of transcend just being a heritage project and actually have some really strong regenerative benefits for the city centre as well. And that is based on increasing dwell. We're looking at 250,000 visitors a year coming to the new museum. So that's additional visitors spending more time in the city. Which is exactly what we want. And off the back of that, we'll be looking for it to stimulate occupation and change of use across the whole of Milsom Quarter, so attracting different tenants, be they residential or commercial. So it's a transformational opportunity for the museum. And I think that's why we pushed really hard to get the building, not because there was a panic, as was said earlier, but because there was an amazing opportunity to create one of the world's, and this isn't hyperbole, to create one of the world's great museums right here in Bath, and that's what we're going to deliver. So what was the second part? Oh, the World Heritage. Yeah, so yeah, I would hope so. I think it will hopefully widen the ownership of World Heritage across the council. I think, Heritage Services are a stakeholder in the World Heritage Management. We look after the Roman Baths, which is a really, really important aspect of the universal value for which Bath is inscribed as a World Heritage Site. But we're much more a stakeholder. And I think when you look at the challenges that face Bath over the coming years around achieving net zero, retrofitting, developments coming up, but those are much more in the planning space that those challenges are going to arise, rather than the interpretation and engagement space, which is where Heritage Services is. So moving World Heritage over to the planning space, I think, gives it a bit more visibility and a bit more opportunity to be embedded more widely across the council's work and get more officers even more cognizant with the specificity of what Bath being a World Heritage Site is. What I'd say as well is the planning service is in sustainable communities, heritage services are in sustainable communities. We're in the same directorate, so we're not forever not going to talk about World Heritage. We're still very much in that space. I'll be retaining my position on the World Heritage Site Advisory Board, and we'll obviously continue to operate the World Heritage Centre. So it's still part of what we do, but it just made sense to change at this time.
Councillor Malloy.
Okay, thank you for your report. Just going back to that comment about Swansteig and property belonging to the council that may not necessarily be managed by by Heritage Services at the moment. I just wanted to mention the Ralph Allen Townhouse, which is also belongs to Baines, and is currently, as I understand, not really doing anything very much. And just wanted to sort of bring it to your attention again, and to say that about 2 years ago, I think it was, or maybe 3 now, the World Heritage Enhancement Fund put some money towards a study of the interior, which you could ask Ainsley Ensom for if you're interested, and with a view to somehow using it, developing it in the future. And I know she's got some ideas, and I'm sure she'd be very pleased to speak to both of you about that at some point. So that was just a bit of a shout out for the Ralph Allen Townhouse, which is tucked away and hardly anybody knows about it. And then, yes, following on from what Shelley Bromley has said here about the move of World Heritage Management to the Planning Service, I just wanted to confirm that the World Heritage Centre, along with the Claude Learning Centre, remains with you. Is that right? And under Heritage Services. And but I understand there is obviously going to be a lot of collaboration between both departments, as it were. And I'm very interested in what you've written about developing a sustainable tourism strategy for Bath and North East Somerset. And I'm hoping that with the synergy now coming from the Great Spa Towns of Europe, that you can work together with them as well, because there's some really good ideas out there, and I think we can all support each other to develop tourism, but in a manageable way that will enhance the well-being of the people who live in the spa towns as well as those coming to visit them. Anyway, thank you. So sorry, I don't think there was a question in there really after all that. I was just making some comments.
That person, about the Ralph Allen House, more than happy to do that, Ruth. Yeah. To go back to your point, Shelley, if I may, Chair. So you brought up the Great Spas of Europe. 20 years ago, a group of people from all cross parties had a great idea to transform Bath and make it a great spa town again. And that's a 20-year project which culminated the other nights with us being given our UNESCO certificate. With regards to the fashion course and the fashion museum and the Milsom Street regeneration, it is the ambition of this administration and hopefully future administrations to transform Bath into a fashion centre. And it's a 15, 20, 30-year ambition and dream. And it's just to give us another, feather in our cap, string in our bow, whatever you want to be. But not just do it, but be the best at it. So we would be the best in Europe, creating a museum which would be the best in Europe, but also attracting the best fashion designers from around Europe to be based in Bath as well, connected to the universities, and that's a 15, 20-year aspiration to transform Bath into a fashion centre, a centre for well-being, and not just a tourist centre.
Thank you. I've got a couple of things. So obviously in the report which Councillor Johnson raised was traditionally including those who have not traditionally welcomed at our sites. So what does that mean?
What I'd say is there's been a historic sort of underinvestment in the audience understanding in the service, and that's not because people have been remiss, but the focus has been on conserving the Roman baths and driving inbound tourist visitation to that site. Post-COVID, we're looking at the service having a much more direct benefit to society in general, but local people especially. So when we say that, we know we're talking essentially about the audience understanding we have is based on the discovery cards that we've issued. And we've issued 23,000 discovery cards since May of this year as we restarted the scheme, which is a really fantastic achievement operationally. But a lot of them have gone to people who live in areas of higher economic sort of situation in Baines. And we're looking at the data, we've got very low penetration of discovery card take-up in the areas that track lower from a socio-economic point of view. So in general terms, those are the areas that we're going to be reaching out to. You know, we have people coming from China to go to the Roman baths, but we struggle to get them in from northeast Somerset. And that's not those people's fault, that's our fault. We need to market the offer a lot better. We need to understand and then try and take down the barriers to participation that people might see, be they perceived or real. And we need to create an offer, talks to the Victoria Art Gallery point, that people actually want to come to as well. So those are all strands that we'll be exploring over the next few years. But when I talk about audiences who traditionally haven't come, in its most general terms, because that's all we've got at the moment, it is people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds.
So my other one, so you put a bid in twice for the Levelling Up bid, once in October 2020 and the other in October 2022. What was the reason that it was turned down?
I wasn't here for the first bid, so I can't recall the reasons that they gave for turning that down. We have received some written feedback from the Department of Housing, Levelling Up Communities, which does list some points. We obviously disagree with some of them, so we're looking for some more detail. There's only so much you can get in a two-sided A4 from the department. So I'm really happy to come back on that question, but I prefer to get exactly what they mean before I'm paraphrasing and trying to guess from the written letter. I've been in contact with the department, and they said, we've sent a letter, very happy to talk further about it, but we just need a bit more time. Bearing in mind there were, 500 bids, and 480 of them were unsuccessful, or 400 of them are unsuccessful, so there's a lot of people looking for feedback. But I'm really happy to come back on that when we get that full explanation.
Yeah, so obviously in the report it says that you have annual reports, the Heritage Advisory Board. It would also be good to have that come back to this panel going forward as well, so that we're keeping up to touch with what's happening in Heritage Scrutiny as well, or Heritage Board as well. So
yeah, really happy to share that. That will bring you along on our journey, and that's where for those who don't know, that board was constituted as part of us being created as a independent business unit, so that provides a good external check and balance on the work we do, and we have external members there from the heritage industry, lawyers, things like that, so they give a good check and balance to what we do.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob, for coming on this afternoon. So, Councillor Moore.
May I just ask something? I don't know if it's possible or not, whether Rob Campbell can facilitate it or not, but I was thinking, since there is this interest in the Fashion Museum, and meaning that as well, but also the assembly rooms, which belong to the National Trust, would it be possible at some point to invite the local manager of the National Trust to come and give a presentation about what they are going to do? I don't know if that's something you can facilitate or not, or
I can ask. I'm happy to ask.
Yeah, maybe it's too early, perhaps at this point, but at some stage it would be. I think we'd all be really interested.
I'm sure we could add that to a forward plan, couldn't we? Yep.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. So, cabinet member update. No cabinet member here. So I want to thank every panel member for the last 4 years that they've given to this. You've given such a lot of input, and I'm hoping it's been beneficial to the cabinet members. Going forward, I'm hoping, after the election, whether we get in or we don't get in, we can most probably meet up with the new chair, vice chair of this panel, and just give some of our advice of what we feel might benefit going forward in the future. So I really want to thank everybody for everything you've done on this panel. Thank you. So that brings us to a close for this meeting.
Chair, could I just say, I think on behalf of all of us, thank you for the way you've chaired this panel. You've been very even-handed and very polite, combating our excesses. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I second this and be noted in our minutes, thanks to the Chair on behalf
Thank you,
of
Councillor Kumar.
our...